All right. So we are going to take the same structure that we've been adhering to this summer, which is, I'll say a brief word. We'll go into breakout groups so that everyone can share a thought. And then we'll have a broader conversation with a little historical background provided. More conversation this week than last week. I do want to say before we begin, like next week, there is I'm going to get those movies, or next week is like this week. I am going to send you by email next week's movie so that you can watch it. They're short films that I have seen on what's called Vimeo. So they're free and easy to access on the internet, unlike this one, which had to be purchased. I had not seen this film prior to assigning it, so I just want to thank those who brought it to my attention. I really enjoyed it, and we'll explore it together. So this was an offering of the Jewish Film Festival, which just ended last night. So hopefully people were able to see more than this film. Raise your hand if you did get to catch a film beyond this one. And that's great. Wow, super. Raise your hand if you saw a film this year, but really hadn't seen as many in Brookline. Did Zoom help you?
It doesn't.
Yep, that's amazing. So that's kind of the beauty of watching these films from home and having access and then sharing them in community like this. It's really a blessing. So the film Sublet, it's an Israeli film. As you notice, although it's in English, which I guess is really nice for English speakers. I kind of wish it showed more of Israel than it did. I really enjoyed seeing Tel Aviv. I miss Tel Aviv. And it had some really nice shots, but more were in the generic apartment. But when they did get outside of the apartment, I really loved it. Tel Aviv, as you know, is named for I shouldn't say as you know, Tel Aviv is based on the name of Herzl's book, Alt Neuland. So when Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, he was a poor playwright. He wasn't a very good playwright, but he wrote two very important books that changed the Jewish world. One was The Jewish State, Der Judenstaat, which was the beginnings of political Zionism, where he said there needs to be a Jewish state. He wrote that. He was a journalist in Vienna. He wasn't heavily identified as a Jew. In fact, he was assimilated. He didn't go to synagogue, and he was sent to report on another assimilated Jew in France, Alfred Dreyfus. And he went to report on the case of Dreyfus, and he was standing outside of the French courtroom reporting for the Viennese newspaper, and he heard people yelling, "Hang the Jew, death to the Jew." And he's thinking to himself, oh my gosh, Dreyfus was an assimilated Jew in the French army, never went to synagogue. And when it comes down to it, everyone yells, "Death to the Jew." Here I am, an assimilated journalist. When it comes down to it, I think I'm welcomed into European society. But when it comes down to it, it's death to the Jew. We're really not as welcome as we had once thought. We need a Jewish state, a state of our own. And he goes home and writes The Jewish State, which really changes the trajectory of Jewish history in ways that I don't even think Herzl, who was kind of crazy, could fathom. I say crazy loosely, although there was great mental illness in his family. There are no descendants left of Theodor Herzl. Two of his children committed suicide. His wife was very sick. and he dealt with mental illness throughout his life. But sometimes I guess it takes a crazy person with no power to go around the world meeting with heads of nations to say, I want to negotiate with you with no power for a Jewish state. And that was Herzl, a little crazy, a lot of chutzpah, and tremendous intelligence and drive, and creates political Zionism. He writes another book called Alt Neuland, describing what that Jewish state would look like. And he calls it Alt Neuland because it would be old and new. It would be based in Jewish history, but embrace tremendous innovation. And he described like things that happened later, like motorized cars and things that didn't exist, electric. So he was kind of fanciful, but he called it Alt Neuland, old new land. So when the founders came to Tel Aviv, they named it in Hebrew Tel Aviv, because a tel is a remnant of the ancient culture. A tel is an archaeological hill where you explore the old, and Aviv is spring, representing all new things, the blossoming. So Tel Aviv to this day is this incredible combination of old and new. It's an incredible place. Many have been there. There's tradition, there's creativity, there are great restaurants, there's incredible culture. And it's the largest city in Israel, unless you include a lot of the settlement neighborhoods of Jerusalem within the count, then Jerusalem would be the largest. And what makes Tel Aviv incredibly unique in the Middle East is its gay culture. In a Middle Eastern world that is so intolerant of GLBTQ issues, people, Tel Aviv is a real haven. The Gay Pride Parade in Tel Aviv is quite extraordinary, and gay culture really permeates the entire city. And so it's interesting, he sets it in Tel Aviv, but in English, because he wants an outsider to see Israel. And I love the line that he ultimately gravitates to, which is, we're in the Middle East. This is Tomer says, but we want to be treated like we're in the West, which is this confused identity of kind of an Israeli Tel Aviv, that we're Middle Eastern, but we're Western. Where kind of our identity kind of gets challenged in different ways. And we see two characters, Michael and Tomer. And Michael is the middle-aged writer who writes, I guess, The Intrepid Traveler, but is actually quite maybe not so intrepid, who we know that he's slightly depressed, he can't sleep. We're not sure why in the beginning of the film, but later we learn that they lose a child from the surrogate. And then we're introduced to Tomer, the young Israeli, a little more out there. And we see that ultimately, across generations, they actually learn something from one another. And I think we see the transformation in the film. So what I would love to do is start with a breakout room. If we can go into groups of 5 for 5 minutes, which is 1 minute a person, don't take too much space or someone's going to get zapped back in the room too early. People hopefully will accept, you know what, let's go with groups of 6, because every once in a while people don't choose to go into a breakout room because they're eating dinner or cooking dinner, and we'll have more people in the room. But I want you to answer your name. If you're a member of TB, how many years? If you're not a member, we just welcome you. And if you can share the following question. Out my papers, and it didn't print. So here, I'm going to just look, because I actually wrote this out for you. The question I would like you to explore is, I'm going to make it up since I don't see it. If I wish I could find how I phrased it, but give me one more second. Here it is. Okay. If you could learn from another generation, would it be a younger generation or an older generation? And why? All right. Tomer learns from Michael. Michael learns from Tomer. I'm just curious where you place yourself. All right, let's go into a breakout room and maybe even what you'd be curious to learn from that generation about life. All right?
Okay.
Let's do it, Deborah. 5 minutes, breakout rooms. Deborah, how are we doing on time?
1 minute and 9 seconds.
Are you able to give them a 1-minute warning?
Sure, I can broadcast a message.
Cool.
Okay, a couple of latecomers, but I put them in a room.
All right.
We got about 30 seconds left. Okay, that's my sign. Okay,
All right.
I'll close the rooms. Here we go.
Let's see if they re-enter.
Yep, I should be re-entering.
I pushed the wrong button. I didn't learn from a younger person.
Oh boy, oh boy. No one's coming back.
Didn't push the wrong button.
Who, me? No, I did. I ended them.
Maybe you ended their call. I'm just kidding.
No, I didn't.
Here they
No.
come. All right.
It's closing in 12 seconds.
I see. Here they come. Excellent.
Yeah. They couldn't break away. Okay.
Do they have that choice? Can they stay in the room?
I think they can stay for an extra minute.
I see.
Okay.
All right. Is everyone back, Deborah? Do we have a sense? All right. I hope people were able to share some thoughts. I went downstairs and realized I was missing a page. So I just want to back up very briefly, which is to say, there's a line in the film in the beginning about Tel Aviv that says it's chaotic, it's intense, it's full of contradictions, and unlike any place I visited, which is so true of a lot about Israel. And through that chaos in this film, we explore some serious issues about aging and family and who we hope to be. So we have two characters largely, Michael and Tomer, from different generations. Michael is the married one. He and his spouse just lost a child. He's having trouble sleeping, goes to Tel Aviv for work, meets Tomer, the freer one, single, immersed in the creativity, the dance, the scene of Tel Aviv. As he says, the sexiest neighborhood in Tel Aviv. And so my first question, and if people can raise their hand or just gently unmute yourself, because I can't see both pages. I just want to kind of broaden the conversation now for us. First of all, out of 1 to 5 stars, 1 star, the lowest, 5 stars, the best movie I've ever seen. Who gives it 1 star? 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. Got it. All right. So by the end of the movie, what do you think each one has learned? So what's the evolution of Michael in that sense, is your read? How does the movie end? Thoughts? Or Tomer?
I think there were some emotional awakenings that happened toward the end, Joel.
And in what way?
I think that Tomer lived a life that outwardly to some of us anyway, sort of shock and awe, but treated it as if it were just, his behaviors were just completely mainstream and run of the mill. And I don't think felt at a level the implications of what he was doing day to day, week to week, month to month. He had aspirations that he would talk about, but his head was somewhere else. And for Michael, it was a little more cliched and obvious. For me, it kind of all erupted at the dinner with Tomer's mother near the end. The hints that you saw along came bubbling up and erupted.
Thank you. Well said. Other thoughts?
You could jump in, Jeffrey. I mean,
Well, Tomer showed that he really did need a father, notwithstanding his statements to the contrary. And Michael turned out to be that father figure that he really did miss.
Nice. Other thoughts? Remember the movie about that.
Complicated briefly by the fact that they had sex, which was really, I thought, kind of problematic in terms of the development of their relationship and their roles as they were sorting them out. And Michael, clearly depressed, just troubled guy, and just kind of trying to get through this trip and deal with it, and wanting a child. And I don't know. I like the observation that Tomer was just sort of living with his sort of youthful head in the clouds with this crazy movie, and which is all at once kind of wonderful and super nutty.
I really thought the movie was about loneliness.
Where you've got people and I can't even tell who they are. So was that Renee speaking?
Yeah, I got the impression that the movie was a lot about loneliness. I really thought everybody in that movie was lonely on some degree. And by the way, my middle name is Aviva, like Aviv. I always thought that was a cool name. But yeah, loneliness to me permeated through the entire movie on every level.
Loneliness, maybe alienation, even from who they truly are. Gary?
I thought one of the crucial parts of the movie that explained who Tomer was when he brought Michael to his mother, as Jonathan mentioned, because they were so open. And I think that Tomer was very open. Now, what Judith said was very interesting to me. The Tomer was so casual about gay sex, and Michael was not. And I thought the generations really were quite different. But it really was interesting to me that, is this really what's going on in Tel Aviv now? In terms of gay sex, haven't they heard of disease and problems? And he was very casual about it.
You could definitely see the generational divide. He can't even Michael's history amidst the AIDS epidemic, Tomer. And Michael, I think that's a critical scene actually in the movie, because that's the place where Michael wants to leave. Right after that, he decides to get up and leave the apartment completely. His judgment of Tomer overwhelms him and says, I'm out of here. And Tomer kind of convinces him to stay.
Rabbi, you think it was the judgment of his judgment of Tomer, or his judgment of himself and where he felt he wanted to be with his own commitment in his own life?
My sense was it was the judgment of Tomer, that he was kind of repulsed by it, but begins to open up his mind over time, and becomes less judgmental later in the film. But I'm curious what other people think.
I thought that if that experience kind of opened his eyes to what he had shut down in his own marriage. I think that in the end, it freed him up. But the scene that really struck me in that movie was on the kibbutz when Tomer is in his childhood home. And before they're leaving, his mother is packing him some food to take home, of course. And he's on the floor with the dog, playing with the dog. He's a child. And I think this is a story of a child acting like a man who finally, through this experience with this stranger, with whom he becomes very close emotionally and physically, opens his eyes to the potential of being grown up. But those pictures of him romping on the floor with the dog were just, I mean, it was just adorable is the only word I can think of. And we see that he's really just a big kid and he has some growing up to do.
Judy?
I think it also, I think there's also a feeling that I got that Tomer would like to engage Michael much more than Michael is willing to be engaged, at least in the beginning, and they sort of move a little in that direction. But I thought that Tomer was using that night of sex as a way of giving something to Michael, which he seemingly was tossing aside or wasn't part of his life. It was clear from his earlier reaction, really wasn't interested in that at that moment. So I think he thought he was doing a good deed, and I think he thought that was a way something he could do that would make a difference to Michael.
Judy Lapp, thank you. Judy Lappin. You have to unmute. You're still muted. Let me see.
Oh, hi. I know a bunch of people were at the program yesterday, the live program. I don't know if you were there with Eitan Fox, the filmmaker. And it was very helpful in terms of his own struggle. He identified much more with Michael and the older generation and the struggles of gay men in Israel in the 80s and 90s. And Tomer is a part of him. I think that he would like to feel freer and more like him, but was struggling with that. So I think that was helpful to see that it was autobiographical. He's also the filmmaker for Walk on Water, which happens to be one of my favorite films. But so.
Thanks. Other contributions? I saw a few hands. Andrea.
Hi. So I guess I have two comments. Well, one is a question. One was anyone else really confused? It was more toward the beginning when Michael, Tomer had met someone on Grindr and had someone over. And I thought Michael sat there on the couch watching them for way too long. I mean, I don't blush easily, but I was like, what is this? I don't understand. Maybe there's something in gay culture where this is like common and okay. But I was really kind of distracted by that. And it was really hard for me to kind of feel for Michael after that. I don't, you know. And then the other comment I had too was that Walk on Water, I think, was also one of my favorite movies. And at the time when I saw it, I don't even remember that much about it now, but I remember thinking how profound it was. I thought it was profound on a lot of levels, and I was kind of waiting for the profundity of this movie, and I think it either went over my head or it wasn't quite there. Anyway.
Shelley Buckler.
Well, this there've been so many people who've already commented on many things that are very interesting, and this was an engaging film. But it is an Israeli film. It doesn't tell you much about Israel, and it apparently doesn't tell you all that much about Tel Aviv. It's a particular culture and neighborhood in Tel Aviv. And in the entire film, all the people appear to be secular. There's no Jewish, there's no religious influence or anything else. And it's in English. So really, it's an American film that's been made in Israel. And that's basically, the thing that disappointed me a little bit, but the rest of it was quite interesting. Thank you.
Nice, insightful. Other thoughts?
I think the fact that he kept reading David Grossman's book, To the Ends of the Earth, was sort of a quiet hint about the problems going on in the relationships, and clearly, and we don't learn until the end. That book is all about a family trying to avoid finding out that their son was killed in the war. And so it's about loss and loss of a child. And so we find out at the end of the story that's really what's bothering Michael. And so it's kind of that relationship with his husband because of that loss that's in a crisis, and Tomer, who doesn't really know how to have a deep relationship with somebody else because of his youthfulness and his experience, and the two of them coming together to help each other over those hurdles and learning from each other what a close relationship can mean, and Michael learning that he can go on after this loss and that it's worth it to try again, and to be re-energized by this new experience and new life that he can start with his husband.
Yeah, so let's focus on Michael a little bit because Tomer has received some of our attention, which is what is it about Tomer that allows Michael to ultimately reconnect with his husband on the plane? It's probably the sweetest conversation we witness them having in the whole film. Thoughts?
My memory is it hinges on a conversation where Tomer tells Michael that he thought he'd be a terrific father, which of course he had become to Tomer. And that seemed to trigger a shift in Michael's approach to everything.
Mm. Other thoughts about what leads to the evolution of Michael? Charlie?
Tomer, but the conversation on the airplane didn't strike me as being so loving, because he had just committed adultery with Tomer, and so that the sex part was very jarring for me. The sex between the two of them at the end, because the movie was moving in such a sweet area with Michael needing a son and Tomer needing a father, and the symmetry of and the beautiful pastiche of that dinner that they had with the mother and the son, the three of them. That was such a beautiful scene. But in reference to what Judy said, the director made a point that I thought was about Michael's growth towards the end. He was a reluctant participant in the sex between Tomer and Michael, but Tomer at the airport broke down and cried as he was saying goodbye to Michael, and that was the growth of Tomer that I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think Michael did grow through the film that much?
I think Michael was acted upon. I didn't see Michael as being very much of the actor.
Thanks. Other thoughts on Michael? Jerry?
Well, this is not so much about Michael. It's building on something Charlie just said. After we watched Sublet, we watched Minion, which is also about a young gay man and somewhat an older man. So my question is, are explicit sex scenes vital to movies, or could they be implied?
So first of all, I would say Israeli film is much more overt than American film. So you'll see nudity on television in Israel, which is interesting about the dichotomy. I mean, many people know that Americans are the most conservative usually in terms of nudity and sex and art compared to Europeans. Israelis are more European in that sense. So what is shocking to us is less shocking, especially in. So, Michael comes with the Passport to Israel program, and Tomer says, wait a minute, do you really want to see Tel Aviv? And you see the dance, you see, some of the craziness of Tel Aviv. Michael is much more American in that sense. So in that way, we get a slight taste of the Israeli openness. Michael does come. It's not just a generational thing, but I think that that's why he does speak English, and he becomes the American travel writer that's exploring Israeli culture, which is a little more open. He comes with a lack of awareness of Israel, even though he's bar mitzvah. When he goes to the kibbutz eventually, he has this, image of the kibbutz like we grew up with, many of us. And Tomer says, oh no, the kibbutz was sold to a multinational company years ago. They don't make the honey here. Your view of Israel is very outdated. Israel is much newer. The way his mom's living on kibbutz and raises a son. But I am curious about Michael, because I do think he evolves through the film.
What I would say to that is that all through the picture, the message that Tomer is speaking and acting to Michael is that you don't have to understand anything. You have to feel it. I mean, he talks about his movie, don't try to figure it out. It's just the experience. How does it make you feel? And that's just not Michael. And I think one of the reasons that he sits as long as he does through that sex scene with the guy from Grindr is he's trying to make something has moved him to try to make himself more open to feeling in the moment. And he stays there as long as he can stand it, and then he has to get up and go. I mean, that seemed to be what was happening there. But he in a very nuanced way came to allow the importance of feelings, which is what finally got him to the place where he wasn't afraid to take a chance with another child. I mean, not wanting to do it again is totally protective, because who could want a chance going through that again? But he finally felt, and I think Tomer taught him this, that feeling, it's okay to feel, you'll survive your feelings, and let it in, let life in and go forward and experience it.
That was my sense of the film, Helene, and that's why they make you sit in that discomfort a little bit. And that's the joke, the inside joke of the intrepid traveler. He's not very intrepid. And in fact, he doesn't really feel the countries he's exploring. He's kind of going through the checklist of sites and never really knowing the feel of the country. And Tomer says, look, do you really want to get to know a country with emotion and feeling? And it's kind of new for Michael for all these reasons. And he's developed kind of this protective space. And I think that the director mentioned this yesterday as well, that after Tomer and Michael have a physical relationship, that they're able to go back to friendship, was telling as well, that he was able to kind of feel friendship and not that sense of judgment, of closure that he had earlier in the film. Gloria?
So I thought that the movie, the director, the way he used the sex scenes was brilliant in that they were non-verbal insights into their feelings. It was totally, if you think about when Tomer, the first guy who comes in, and then there's another guy, but the first guy, he goes at him, he goes straight for his junk. He doesn't kiss him. He's just performing a mechanical act. But with Michael, he kisses him, he hugs him, he strokes his back. He is, someone else said this, that he was giving him something. He wanted Michael to recover. He felt his great pain for whatever, wherever it came from. I'm not so sure about the father, son, and the son and the father. These were two men, two human beings. And Tomer was omnisexual. He said that at some point. He doesn't care, man, woman, it doesn't matter. He just, that's his pleasure. So I saw the thing almost like he was going for a smorgasbord. But Michael was very, very different. The way he handled him, I saw it as a gift, and Michael didn't refuse. And it freed Michael. It really, because he got this dose of great affection, love, really, that he felt from Tomer, not romantic love, just love, again, from one person to another. And that was really beautiful.
Thanks. Other thoughts? Anyone? Oops, I saw one more hands. Ronnie.
It's so interesting to look at that scene and see it so differently. Because for me, that scene was such a disconnect, because I thought that the scene at the kibbutz was the most moving scene. That's where Michael was able to really share what the deep feelings about the grief and the loss of his daughter. And that was the turning point. And when they got back and Tomer realized the deepness of his feelings, if they had, for me, just laid in bed and held each other, that would have meant more to me than having the sex scene. That lost it for me. And because for Tomer, sex was all, the growth for me at that moment would have been Tomer just holding him and not acting out with sex, because for sex was what all Tomer at that moment knew what to do. His growth for me would have been not having sex, and I think having sex added a whole other, layer as to what was going to happen to,
Just keep talking.
We just lost you for a minute.
So we see you.
You see us because we don't see you. And so I wish that hadn't happened. It just kind of, I don't know where you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that showed the growth.
I agree too.
Because now sex wasn't just something casual and not to think about, but it was something very meaningful that he was doing for Michael and to help Michael, and that it can have a real deep spiritual relationship and loving relationship, and not just passing, and his growth as to seeing it as something more than that.
Ronnie Nicholson had her hand up.
I sort of felt at the end, it was Michael coming back to Michael, which I thought was that it was sort of what Eitan Fox said in his, in the discussion, that I think Eitan Fox was coming to grips with what it meant to be 50 and accepting himself at that stage and understanding that he was going to struggle with people who were younger and were living a different lifestyle, but to come back to a place where you accept yourself given where you are in your generation and what your history is, what your personal pains have been, and to see that you can contribute from your point of view. And I think that Michael, it felt like Michael was more settled when he was sitting in the plane, that he was comfortable. He had come on a journey of exploring more extremes, but came back to himself. And that felt good.
Yeah. For me, I thought the one thing I would say about the sex scene, the discomfort was intentional and necessary for Michael to grapple with himself. But final comments, Judy Lappin, since you were involved with the film festival. You're muted though. Let's see. Can you unmute? You're still muted. There we go.
This discussion has been great, and the support for the film festival has been wonderful. But Ronnie and I had talked, and I really agreed with Ronnie. I think when I heard Gloria, I agreed with Gloria too, which is what's so wonderful about having these discussions. And I think that he went back to himself, but not quite himself. I think he went back to himself, but a self that was a little bit looser and a little bit more open to other ways that he had experienced. And I think that's what the director was talking, the filmmaker. I felt like it was that those were two parts of himself that he'd been struggling with. And I think the sense I got is that Eitan Fox was saying that he grew. This movie was a way for him to grow and move too, as Michael did.
Thanks. So with that, I want to thank those who suggested this movie. It wasn't on the original list, but it was fun to discuss and process. Pay attention to your emails. Next week, we're going to look at 2 or 3 short films that are made from young directors in Israel. Marlene, question? You're muted. How about now? Can you try to unmute? No? Deborah, do we know what the problem is here?
I don't think we have a class next week, do we?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's in 2 weeks.
I was
Correct.
So let me just look at the calendar before we go. I do want to invite you, there's a lot of learning, so just shout out any learning opportunities. I think, is T-Bell tomorrow?
Yep.
Excellent. That is Josh Levy speaking.
The one about the
Puccini.
He's not
Not
speaking.
T-Bell tomorrow, it's Lunch and Learn tomorrow.
Lunch and Learn, 11:30.
And that is.
It is Josh Levy, and he's going to be speaking about the scandal with
Varsity
tuition.
Varsity Blues.
Yes, he represented.
To learn 30.
He
And
represented.
Marilyn Becker is doing Puccini.
At 1:30, yeah.
1:30.
And then Thursday night, we have Jeremy Burton speaking about the Black Lives Matter movement and the Jewish community to try to untangle a little of that complexity.
Tomorrow night is a sisterhood movie discussion as well from another Boston Jewish Film Festival movie, Shiva Baby. So if you saw it, you can join in that as well, or even if you didn't see it.
There is a lot going on. And then next week, of course, continued learning opportunities and Thanksgiving. And then we'll meet again. All right, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Care.